feel like I'm standing at the edge of a stage.
It's confusing because it's flipped. So I'm trying to center myself, and I'm having a hard time doing that. So it's the opposite.
I'm always doing you do the best you can. You just kind of wing it. Once it starts, it flows, but it's that stage fright anxiety. And we're live. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to FIT Diversity Comic Con. We are here this morning with Mika Song, and we're going to be discussing her brand new graphic novel, Donuts Feed the Squirrels. And I'd like to start by thanking Ramon Gill for setting up the Diversity Con and all the exciting things we've been able to see for the past day and continuing today. And I'd like to thank Dr. Joyce Brown and Dr. Ron Milan for helping us with this endeavor. So why don't we get started? And I'd like to introduce Mika. Mika, welcome to our convention, and thank you for speaking this morning.
Hi, good morning, Ed. Thanks for having me. This is my first graphic novel, Donut Feed the Squirrels, and it's for emerging readers, 6 to 7 years old and up, and it's intended for kids who are just learning how to read, and maybe it's the first graphic novel that they ever read by themselves, or the first book that they read by themselves. And so it's 5 chapters, and they're all about 10, 15 pages long. And about 20 words per page. So it's very digestible. And there's a lot of action and body humor and slapstick. So
right.
The pace going.
Excellent. Well, I actually would like to start this, if we could, go back a little bit for you. And I know that you've had a journey all the way from where you were born to Hawaii, to Pratt, to being an animator, and now a graphic novelist.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to start with something that I found really interesting in my own life, and that is, how were those experiences as a kid influencing the work you have now? Were you like an educational, were you like into kids' educational cartoons? What was influencing you? What did you love? And do you see a relationship of that work that you loved as a kid to the characters you're now creating in this current graphic novel?
Yeah, I've had to kind of think about that in hindsight after making things. And then, you have to talk about your own work and sort of think about where these things came from. I'm becoming more conscious of all of that. But I grew up, I think my biggest influence would be the funny pages or comics in newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have, I grew up in the Philippines. And so we did have some syndicated cartoons, comics that were published in the newspapers there.
Mm-hmm.
There is one particular comic strip that ran, I think, for about 4 or 5 years when I was a kid, called Ichabod, and it's about rodents, and it's satirical. It's kind of like a Doonesbury almost, but it's all rats, and they all have like this expression that's like this, and I think I sort of really like that expression. I was like, oh. It's true, like all adults are kind of like that. They all like scowling all the time. And so I gravitate towards characters that have like that sort of edgier face, but they're still really cute.
Yeah.
I find that so amusing. And so I think I still do use that. And I also really love Calvin and Hobbes. And I had a Far Side like calendar that you would rip every day off.
Sure.
And I remember like sitting in the bathroom as like a 8-year-old and like reading those over and over again, not as like a calendar, but like as a book kind of.
Yeah. So in the Philippines, there's a great tradition of cartooning. There's a lot of world famous cartoonists that have come out of the Philippines. Were you connected to any of that tradition, or did you move to Hawaii early on in your life?
Yeah, so I actually was only there during my childhood. I moved when I was 13 to Hawaii, and then there I got to see a lot of independent comics because it was around the early 90s, and
right.
So there was record stores, and you could go in and people were self-publishing zines, and there would be like sometimes independent comics included in those. And and then you could get access to like Love and Rocket still, and
Sure.
older comics.
Sure. The Hernandez brothers. Sure.
Yeah. So that really kind of was really interesting to me, because I never was interested so much in superhero comics.
Right.
But it was really interesting to me to see that this something that was I could relate to more in comics.
Okay.
The medium, and that's where I really got attracted to it. And then also Persepolis was when I found that, I think I was in college already.
So that gets a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And by then, college for you was Pratt Institute, correct?
And then I went to Pratt. I met some people that were visiting New York and living there, and they invited me to like stay with them in New York if I ever made it there. They're like, you should apply to colleges. So I applied to Cooper Union, and I did not get in. And then I applied to Pratt.
Okay.
And yeah, and Pratt in those days, was like very discombobulated.
Right.
But so I was started out in as a printmaker. I got in as a printmaker, and then I realized there's too much equipment to buy, so I decided to switch my major to illustration. And then that was pretty okay until I got to the point where we had to do where we had to trace letters onto Mylar. We had to trace, just to really know the ligatures and all the separate parts of the letters. And I realized that I was in the wrong field. So I switched again. My roommate told me that she's like, a lot of your drawings, because she'd see me drawing at home, and she'd be like, a lot of your drawings have narrative element to it. So why don't you try animation? Because I'm going to make my boyfriend take animation, and it's a surefire way to get a job when you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
We know you need a job when you graduate. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. And so I switched to animation. And that was like right at the cusp. I think that was like 97 or 98. And the department was still like half in the film world. So we had to learn how to like shoot with a Bolex 16 millimeter for animation.
Sure.
And at the same time, they were hiring people and teaching them and buying Pro Tools. No, wait, not Pro Tools. Final Cut.
Final Cut Pro, sure.
And they were like, I don't know whether should we invest in Final Cut? Should we invest in this other platform? So it was all like kind of a weird transitional period.
Yeah, it was choppy seas. I remember coming into the field where everything was done on paper with glue, with Mylar, like you said, and then suddenly somebody got up one day and said, "It's all going digital. You've got 2 weeks," and that's how we were all thrown into it.
Right.
I find it interesting that you had to find your way into animation by way of printmaking and then illustration. And I know that typography tends to only be a small part of it. But did you ever consider being an animator, or was that something that you just revealed itself and said, okay, that's for me?
Also, before my roommate had suggested it?
Before, well, perhaps before, during, and after, like in retrospect.
Oh, I always loved cartoons. Like I when I moved to Hawaii, I started watching MTV had Liquid Television at the time.
Sure.
And so on cable, and so there'd be like and also Ren and Stimpy was running at the time. And so there was a little bit of like a renaissance of really kind of experimental almost animation.
Sure.
And like Aeon Flux and those things. So I was really interested in animation, inspired by animation, but it wasn't until college when I realized like I could take it as a major and possibly get a job in it, theoretically get a job in it.
Okay, and then you had a career in animation in children's educational programming?
Yeah, well, so it wasn't exactly that cut and dry. When I graduated, it was around September 11, and so we watched. Like I was in the computer lab. I think I was still using the computer lab because I didn't have a computer, but I had freelance work for layout design.
Okay.
So I was using the computer labs, and then I heard this big boom, and I ran all the way up to the top of the tower of our the computer lab's engineering building. Has like a very high vantage point, and you could see the towers from there. And but yeah, so the economy was just like already going down during that time period, and then things were really hard. So I couldn't get an animation job, and I ended up working as like an administrative assistant for 3 different things. And luckily I had taken 1 class in Flash. So I could do some sort of web design. So I was doing some freelance web design. And then, and yeah, so, but eventually after like 4 or 5 years, I got a job at an educational kids website. And that was great because I kept that job for like 8 years. And
Right.
it was
Gave you an anchor.
Beautiful job. Yeah. And it really kind of set me up to be able to like quit and finally pursue like picture book illustration.
And that brings me to our first question in the feed is, what was that journey like for getting published? Though I'd like to add, how did you make your way back into publishing, or were you always doing your drawings and project? And like, when did these characters start to come alive?
Yeah, so I was working at the website making animations, and about like the 6 or so, and my one of my best friends was my coworker there, and so she kind of got me. I would always make mini comics, and they were always about growing up with my grandparents and kind of like surreal and a little darker. And she was like, I'd always make her read them during my lunch break. And she was like, because she is in children's book publishing. She's an illustrator as well, author illustrator as well. And so she's like, why don't you try doing, content that's for children? So I was like, all right, I'll try it. And I tried it, and I was like, okay, it's not, I think my first story was about like a little girl that falls into a noodle bowl. And I completely just forgot about like, it's kind of like Finding Nemo or some sort of thing like that. But I completely like just neglected that there was like scalding hot water in the ramen bowl.
Maybe the kid was tough.
Yeah, she would definitely be tough. And so I turned that into a little like dummy, a dummy, right? And took that to my first Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators convention in Princeton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and got a lot of mixed feedback on that and my portfolio, but some people were really like, yeah, I was looking at the work around me and I was like, I think I can do this. I just need to really put a concentrated effort of like 6 months and just go at it like wildly. Like
so being part of that organization helped you develop, because you've realized it was something that was attainable. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It wasn't a pipe dream.
No, yes, exactly. It's a really great organization. It has a lot of resources, and it offers up a lot of opportunities. And they offer things for people at all stages of their career. So there's like mentorships. I found my critique group through them. So once I decided to quit my job, I finished up paying off my student loans, and I had saved up some money, and I was like, I'm just gonna try this. I'm gonna try not doing anything but picture books and working on that and pitching and trying to sell picture book ideas for the next like 3 or 4 months. And if all things just go to pot, I'll just crawl back to my job and be like, you gotta give me a job back. I've been there for 8 years, or find something else to do. So
you took that leap of faith.
I took that
full time into publishing on your own.
Yeah, and it kind of like all sort of fell into place. I submitted my portfolio to the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Winter Conference portfolio show, where they pick a winner, and I won that year. And so then, and by that time, I'd already been putting my work out on Instagram, and I had already been talking to someone who ended up becoming my agent. And also, I met that agent because I had met someone at a Society of Children's Book Writers workshop who ended up becoming agented by that agent and was like, you need to look at my friend's work. And so she checked out my Instagram. So it was pretty much all of my breaks were through that organization. So and it's like an $80 annual fee.
Right. I've had some relationship. I've actually spoken to their conferences before.
Yeah.
I do have a question. How has comic graphic novel work and sequential work been embraced by the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators?
So I'm actually gonna do. Actually gonna talk about my publishing journey with my agent on one of the satellite SCBWI. I think it's the South Breeze region. I forgot, but I can post it on my. I'll post it somewhere after this, but it's coming up in like next month, and
we'll
it's
try to get that to people.
Yeah, but they do have. I've noticed now the workshops they're offering are for sequential art and writing also for sequential art. So I think they try to really stay current to whatever is going on in the industry, and the people that are running that organization are actually people working in the industry and hiring, so they really would know.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's segue, since we've covered some of those bases, let's segue back to actual content. Now, I find it interesting that you talk about the grandparents and you talk about the relationship of a child with grandparents. And I really like the segment in your book where the grandfather he's the one reading the newspaper. So in all of this new world, the grandfather is still reading a newspaper that he makes into a hat that he hides under. And it's kind of a very playful and very, very kind and very loving. And that's what I was talking about. I was talking about your own childhood experiences. Were you extrapolating on that relationship to bring into that story?
For sure. I mean, I was very close with my grandparents. I used to take long walks with my grandfather, and they took care of me. So I'm very fond of them, and I do like having I do like depicting older people as sort of childlike and playful as well, because speaking on experience of my own grandparents, they were also very childlike in a lot of ways, even though I think all people are actually very childlike. They just pretend to have matured, developed, but really, they're all just kind of like children, and still the same things that are would make them happy as a child would kind of entertain them still. So I kind of operate on that premise.
I think it's important, and I think it's important for creators of every level, in fact, everybody on earth, to retain that some element of childhood or childhood sense of wonder in your work. I know as a creator, it's incredibly important. It sounds like it's incredibly important to you. And I like the fact that you thought about you did a graphic novel dedicated to be someone's first independent reader graphic novel. I believe that things like gutters and having somebody having to be a participant in the graphic novel process, that they're actually animating the drawings that you do between the frames in the gutters. Right? And I'm curious if you're giving a lot of thought to that as somebody who is an animator, and you're sort of in your own mind, are you sort of animating those in-betweens for yourself in your imagination? Does that ever happen for you?
Not consciously, but once I do it, I start laughing because it makes me so happy, because I think to myself, I just saved so much time. Like, I'm not going to draw the wheels flying off of this, this roller skate and everything and all of the details. I'm just going to let it happen off screen. Right. On the next panel, I'm just going to spend my time writing the word crash.
Right.
With a big flag line around it. And all that information is going to play out in that person's head, hopefully.
I see.
And I just saved myself so much time. It just makes me chuckle. But I do love that part. And I think it truly does make you more an engaged experience. I like that. And that it's intimate too with books, that you can you kind of have to be in a small group to read them, and you have to be kind of quiet. And I did spend a lot of time as a child by myself. So I think I do like that. Being able to talk to someone in that format is really appealing to me. It's really
there's an intimacy there that I think is really important. You have tactility. You touch the page. Mm-hmm. You open it up. You see a double page spread. You can see all of it, but you focus on one part. You're a participant. And I've always believed that for kids, in fact, I'm really glad that there's been a real renaissance of children's graphic novels, because I think it's a muscle that needs to be exercised, and a muscle in your brain. I don't know if it's definable as an actual muscle, like a part of your arm or leg, but I believe it's part of your brain that can grow. And I think that allowing kids to be participants through a graphic novel, you're building that up. So almost the more that they do and the more that they read, the more exciting graphic novels and comics become. I'm sure that's what happened to me. And I'm curious if that's what happened to you that made you want to become a comic creator.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how. It's hard to think of myself like how I experienced it, but I know when I watch kids reading graphic novels, and especially the young kids that are around 6 years old. I like to see it when they kind of mouth out the words to themselves, and if there's a funny bit, they'll read it like over again in different ways, like they're trying to be the actor of it. And I think there's something going on there where they're like practicing how to use the language and practicing how to communicate through this thing and how to be funny, how to connect with someone. And I don't think you can do it as much with cartoons because you'd have to watch the cartoon over again. But there's sort of with graphic novels, you can kind of, or with comics, you can kind of play it back in real time.
Sure. You can turn a page back or go forward or whatever.
Right.
And I agree. I believe that cartoons are great, and I love cartoons. But in a cartoon, you're so passive. You just take it in, and it's always going forward, so you're following along. In comics, you're the gasoline, you're the energy, you're the electric. So you decide how fast it goes.
Yeah, but I'm not sure exactly. For myself, I don't remember. I'm not sure what exactly attracted me to it. I know the imagery is really important to me. Like I tended to gravitate towards really beautifully drawn, like the Calvin and Hobbes
Well, Watterson is a wonderful draftsman.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another thing I'm curious about your work and what I am of all creators of work that I like, and that is, how did you find your voice? You seem to have created an incredibly unique shape language for your characters. They stand out, yet they read as and come alive as these squirrels. How did you come to your design of your characters?
So I drew a lot of squirrels over and over again, and a lot of them look like the other squirrels. If you look at the book, there's I'll show you the other squirrels. They sort of look kind of like long socks, and probably more like a traditional squirrel shape. But I decided that I really wanted to make them easy to draw because a lot of people, a lot of kids like to draw a character.
Sure.
So I wanted to make sure that it was really defined shapes, and that just works out anyways because if you're working in small panels, then you need to be able to recognize it even if it's tiny. So I really forced myself to work within those simple shapes. And I guess the thing I wanted Norma to have very.
Could we zoom in on this, please, so everybody can see a full screen of Mika's drawings? Great, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted her to have a pointy look because she's the leader and she comes up with the plan, and so she's basically two triangles. That's how I explain how you draw her.
Right.
And I wanted to stick with watercolors and ink because when I started out with picture books, I knew that it was one of the only illustration mediums that people were still working in watercolor.
Mm-hmm.
And I work coming from my day job or my animation gig being all in Flash.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to make sure that it felt different. The work felt actual process of working felt different. And so at first it was frustrating when I was making my portfolio and getting back into drawing all the time with watercolor and ink. I wanted to just jump back into the computer world and kind of work there and paste things up and edit that way. But I just decided that I was gonna really try to stick with the watercolor thing because I knew somehow it would just give me it would be easier for me to get my own style if I stuck with it.
Was it a struggle to go back and forth between digital and traditional media? Like, had you become so comfortable with Flash and doing that style of animation that going back to traditional? Was it a transition period?
There was a transition period. There was a transition period. I still penciled all my storyboards in animation with on paper, but other than that, I wasn't painting anymore at all. So I really had to like paint all the time again and work that way. But the good thing about it was it didn't feel like work. Like if once I would be on a computer, I would automatically be in work mode. Like, that I just spent that I was like back at work. And if I was working on my portfolio or working on picture books, I would be just paper and watercolors, and it felt like a good time. Like it felt like a luxury almost in that day and age. So it kind of really it was like self-motivating in a ways, like to avoid the computer.
Does it still feel that way? Does it still feel like I feel that sense of joy? And I don't know. I mean, I only can speak from my own experience, but I have to draw every day. If I don't draw for a day or two, it's like I didn't go to. If I don't go to the gym for 3 weeks, you just feel like
yeah.
So for me, drawing is like that. I need to draw. It's just I'm compelled to do it. I think that if you do it every day, I think it's really good. And I've been trying to figure out a way to amalgamate and merge the digital and traditional worlds. And we talked before we started speaking about how you developed a process that you're taking the traditional and you're shooting it with an SLR, right? And then going back and playing with it for the computer. Do you feel that brings it in print closer to your original intent with traditional media?
Yeah, just to get the colors right. So I was like, I made a rule for myself. I was like, I want to minimize the suffering that goes into this because like I'm doing this for fun. Like the pay is not as good as animation.
Okay.
I mean, right now
but it could go into a 25th edition and you get royalties 50 years from now from work you did last year. That's a plan, right?
What do you think? Yeah. But yeah, so the way I think is like I have to make it extremely like pleasurable for myself to do this because that's really what I'm getting out of it. So I decided like, okay, do I want my style to be really tight? Do I want to make sure like all of that I decided not to be like that because it doesn't fit my personality. I was like, I'm just gonna concentrate on revealing emotions in the line and worry a lot less about whether the line goes over a little bit. So the only thing if I really kind of like keep telling myself that, because once you go into the computer and you digitize your drawings, you start to be like, oh, well, actually I could draw that eye a little better. And I do this. And then the next thing you know, you spent 5 hours on a drawing that's like one of 118.
Yeah.
And it kind of ruins your flow, and it kind of ruins like the happiness and the joy of just creating this story. So for me, I decided like all I'm gonna do as a rule to myself is just change the colors so that they match the illustrations, the original art. And that's actually kind of hard to do with a scanner for myself. I haven't been able to really wrap my head around how to adjust the color balance.
Yeah, the calibration, sure.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I think what you're talking about, and I know exactly what you mean. Like sometimes you'll spend 7 hours on a foot, right? And you can't get the foot right. And I think if you could just get beyond that need for perfection, that you'll arrive at the place where you can then put the overall, I guess the je ne sais quoi of the whole story is you get that sense of joy, right? Do you think we need to go through that struggle to get to that sense of joy, to let go of that perfection?
Definitely, because honestly, I redraw things about like 15 or 20 times over and over again. And then for my characters, I've drawn them like hundreds of times once I figure out the character design.
Right.
So by the time like you actually do sit down to do the final art, and also I work really small. I work at like 110% of.
Wow, that is kind of small.
It's
That's
almost one.
postage stamp size is what they call it. Sure.
Yeah.
On that, I have a great question from Ramon in the chat, and he wrote, "I noticed that that the story invokes many senses, like it smells like crispy sugar, oil, or a hint of linden flowers. Approximately what percentage of the senses beyond sight were added after you wrote the first drafts?" And I would like to add something to that. Do you like go out and go to the donut truck? Did you find a donut truck? Do you go to a spot where they've got like a bunch of food trucks, maybe under the highway or something? And do you allow that to permeate into you? Or was there another way that you came to this idea of a food truck as this sort of adversary or conflict to make up for the disaster with the pancakes?
Yeah, no, so the squirrel idea I got from a park that I used to go to in Brooklyn called Fort Greene Park, and there's a squirrel infestation basically there, and the squirrels are really wild and they're like really bold and they steal food out of strollers and they're like leaping from tree to tree. It's like monkeys in a safari basically.
Right, they're little bandits.
They're bandits, and then the food truck and so I really wanted to do a story about these squirrels, and I just kept drawing them, and they came up, and I knew I wanted it to be a heist story. And then similarly in the neighborhood when I first moved to it, there was a donut truck that would appear every Sunday, 1 block away from the house, and we moved in like the middle of winter.
So just for the audience and me, actually, are you in Brooklyn?
No, so I'm in Queens now.
Oh, land of my birth. Okay.
Oh,
Queens.
really? Where?
So a donut truck in Queens. All right.
Yeah. Okay, so no, so the donut truck is in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, actually now the donut truck is in North Carolina, apparently.
Wow, gets around.
Harvey Donuts, they make fresh apple cider donuts upon ordering. And it's exactly that truck. It's a red truck. And the donuts are amazing. Like the first minute you eat it, you have to eat it right there, like out in the street. Because like if you take it home, it tastes different. It still tastes good, but it doesn't taste like amazingly good the way it does that first minute. But anyways, so I really loved the way the truck looked. I just thought it was such a magical truck, and that they could just make donuts out of a truck seemed like really cool to me. And that it would only appear, once in a while as this ephemeral like thing. You just hoped it would be there, and if it happened to be there, it was like an experience. So I really started to think, and then also the chimney of the donut truck was like just the right size for a squirrel. And then the other week, a squirrel had like jumped into my my coffee mug, like that I had set down on the side of.
Wait. So the squirrel physically jumped into your coffee mug? I
didn't see the squirrel jump, okay? But I turned around and I saw my coffee mug like twitching.
Right, bad sign.
There was a squirrel in it, so I'm assuming that it jumped in there.
Right.
So that's kind of like the gutter. Right?
Okay.
but like, yeah, and so I guess I kind of held on to these nice scenes in my mind, and over time, over sleep and stuff, they start to like click together into a story.
Right. Did you make notes of that right away, or is it just was it like a happenstance that stood out in your mind? And I'm a huge proponent of getting out there and living life. And I've heard this from people who run major animation studios: live your life and allow those experiences to then inform you as a creator. And that's exactly what it sounds like happened to you.
Oh yeah. No, you definitely to get original ideas, you have to like get stuff from your life, you know. Because you're the only one living your life, so they're already going to be original, and you always want to try to do something unique so that so that people will want to, read your book, right? So
let's talk a little bit about the individual characters. We already touched on the grandfather character, and I loved, like I said, how it became like that sort of newspaper hat in it. And what about the two main characters? Did you cast them? Are they based on people that you know? Are they a mix of a bunch of different people, or did they emerge in a different way in terms of who they are?
So yeah, they're an amalgamation. Like Norma is, she's a little bit like myself, but also a little bit like my daughter.
Okay.
She has the name of my grandmother's favorite niece, who was like a very like firecrackery woman. So
Right.
I wanted to use that name. That it sort of also has like a sharp, like the N is kind of like a sharp shape that kind of reminds me of Norma's body.
So you made Norma not only sort of sharp and I don't want to say abrasive, but strong, right?
Yeah,
But
aggressive.
not a pushover, right?
Right.
So you designed her with the triangles, which is interesting because normally triangle is designed for villains, but she's not a villain. She's a little mischievous,
Yeah.
but she's not like a bad squirrel.
Yeah, I sort of describe her as like an arrow. Like wherever her head is pointing is like where the action's gonna go. So she's the leader. So she just kind of like takes you on the journey. And then Belly is the shorter, rounder one. And that one's she's the muscle. So she kind of she kind of like goes with the flow and like here I'll show you a picture of.
Okay, could we zoom in on Mika, please? Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, Belly's the one that people have described her as looking like a fire hydrant or a gumdrop.
Okay.
And she's very simple to draw. And people are like, oh, how are you inspired to draw her? But I think I just really want a simple shape. She kind of looks like a lot of things, really, like gosh.
How did you come to the final design and the final version of her? And is she? And you said that Norma is your daughter and named after a fiery relative.
Yeah.
What about Bella? Where did she come from?
So then Belly was like she just worked as a contrast to Norma. So everything about her was going to be different. Like and it worked out because she's going to be smaller and she's going to be more go with the flow, but she's also like the muscle. So she's like more athletic. And she's the one that actually jumps into the truck and does all this acrobatic stuff.
Did you actually find a more angular squirrel in the wild and Wilds of Queens, and then perhaps a little bit of a rounder squirrel to study?
Yeah, well, so recently I've been looking at squirrels from all over the world, and there's like a Japanese flying squirrel that looks exactly like that shape. They're just like little balls.
Oh, they can fly or bounce, in this case, off the donuts.
Yeah. And then actually I do this thing where like I take pictures of squirrels that you can see here. I forgot what they're called, like North American squirrels.
Okay, it's okay.
But anyways, if you look at the head when they turn and you trace over that shape into a simple shape, it's a triangle in profile. So give it a try. It's really a triangle. I do it sometimes for like kids workshops, but I didn't print one out today. So
okay. So let me ask you: do you love donuts?
Oh yeah, I love donuts.
Okay.
Yeah, I love donuts. It's kind of weird because like people are there's like a Frankfurt Book Fair right now, and my agent's foreign rights representative is like talking to people about the book, and a lot of people are like, well, we don't have donuts, or we don't have donuts in our country, or like they don't have squirrels or things like that. So
maybe it's an opportunity. You could expand these characters to open donut shops around the world.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you see these characters becoming recurring characters? Are they going to then do a heist at an empanadas truck or a popsicle truck? Like, are they going to form a gang of squirrels that goes around the world and takes on food trucks?
Oh, like international? They become an international
squirrel gang that goes after food trucks.
Yeah, I would. I do have a book coming out again from Random House Graphic. That's the follow-up called Apple of My Pie. And you'll be happy because it features Gramps getting whisked away to an apple farm, and the girls have to go rescue him.
So it's going to go from a caper to a rescue mission.
Yeah.
They're becoming more heroic.
Yeah, definitely Littleby gets to shine in the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions here. This is from the audience. How long from the time you came up with the idea for your book to when it was published? How long was this book? Was this in process?
Okay, so it was actually like about pretty fast, all things considered, if you compare it to picture books in general.
Right.
The idea started about, I think, 2 years, a year before we managed to sell it. And we sold it. It was like quite surprising and out of the blue. It was originally, I was showing it to my agent as a picture book. And a picture book idea. And there was the little girl was a big deal in the book. She was a main character, and the squirrels were messing with her in the book.
Okay.
And my agent was like, yeah, there's something missing. You got to keep working on it, rewrite it. And so I have a bunch of projects like that where I just have it in the back, and and it's missing something. And I hope one day I'll find the missing ingredient to make it like a story.
Sure.
And so I kind of did that with that, and I shelved it. And then she happened to be at Book Expo, meeting people, and she had all her clients' work. She always keeps all her clients' work on an iPad with her, and she met with the director of Random House Graphic, which was just sort of forming out of thin air, basically at that point. And I always used to tell. Oh, and so. She's like, oh, I actually have a client who loves comics and who has a few comics in her portfolio. And I had comics that I had made as actually a promotional piece for my first picture book that I wrote myself called Tea with Oliver, which is about a cat and a mouse. Mm-hmm. And so she showed them those promotional things that I happen to keep on the back of my website. I think like maybe 3 people have seen that comic on my website. And she showed it to Gina, and she was like, oh, I really like these comics. We should set up a meeting. And then my agent was like, oh yeah, and she has this idea about these squirrels that heist a donut truck. And it's like the one sentence elevator pitch. And then she called me up and she's like, yeah, you need to really write this out.
And that leads me to another question in our chat. This is from Alan. Do you rewrite the words as much as you revise the drawings?
Oh yeah. So I rewrite the words. So I do the script first, and I write that about on my own maybe like 3 times. Oh, sorry, with others about 3 times. And that takes a long time to get to that first draft already. So, and then as I'm working on it with the actual drawings, I start to rewrite it again, but just like very small, hopefully. Sometimes like I'll move some scenes around at that point, which is not good, I know, but like
yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So, but I try not to do that too much. Like maybe up to 10 pages it happens.
Okay.
Sometimes if I'm lucky, it doesn't happen that much. And then even like at the last copy editing phase, and I shouldn't really say this out loud, but like it's true, at the last copy editing phase, I'm still like, so I know that we use the text is not handwritten. The text is not part of the art. It's a font that they created, that the graphic designer created, so they can actually edit it. I mean, it's bad.
Right, up until it goes to the printer. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but then I'm like, oh, please, I just really like to change this one sentence to not have the OH comma before it and just have it just start with like the pronoun. Please, can we just see if we can make that one little
that's that perfection thing torturing you again. I understand. Yeah. I understand. I'm curious because as an animator, have you ever gone ahead and animated these characters? Have you ever seen them? Has the animator in you wanted to see your characters come alive? And have you done a sample of that yet?
No, I never have. I have not had any time to do any kind of animation. I wanted to do an animated promo trailer for my book, and it just didn't happen. Like, I just haven't had any time to do that. I think it would be interesting. I'm curious to see like what the voices would be like, because I think that's always the strange thing. Whenever I see someone animate an existing story book, I'm like, that's not the voice I would have picked, or like, yeah, that is a great voice.
This goes back to the beginning of our discussion when we talked about that everybody brings their own something to the graphic novel.
It's true.
And as a creator, you're so invested that you bring what you think they sound like. And I'm curious, we talked about perfection. We talked about letting it go and allowing that joy to be part of it and overcoming your own need for perfection. But I also truly believe that when you, like, I know when I draw characters and I do pages, I know this is crazy, but maybe you can make me feel a little bit less crazy, is the characters speak to me. And I know what they're saying and I know how they would speak, and writing their dialogue comes out as a natural flow. Is the same thing happen to you?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like, they actually make a big deal out of something so natural, I think, to people, like when they're drawing, especially comics, for some reason, where like you start making all the sound effects and things like that. Like, just, I don't know, it just comes out while you're drawing. Maybe because it's like, I'm not sure why it happens, but someone has to study that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. So they are going down the road in the roller skate, right? They're making the getaway, right?
Yeah.
You draw the word crash.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in your head?
So, it's the scene where Little B is like she's the getaway driver, right? And so she acquired the roller skate. It's the getaway car, and she comes into the frame, and she's like, everyone's like, yes, it's Little B, and then she goes right past them, and they're like, oh, where is she going? And then she comes back around, and she's like, how do you stop this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Excellent.
crash, and it's like basically she just shoots out of the top, and then the tongue and the ties just go like flap out.
Right. So you have an idea in your head. You didn't need to go draw it, but you see what I mean about it's so much exciting and vivid and visceral, like the way you describe it. You've just directed a movie scene in the head for your own characters. And it's a great, because I've heard stories of fans coming up to artists and being, I love this scene that you did, and all the characters exploded and the bomb went off and everybody ran and this was craziness. And the guy looks at them and he didn't say it, but he goes, I never drew that scene. So the best scene of somebody's experience with your graphic novel could be the one that they have in their imagination.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And that's why I think doing books for kids at this level, I have a daughter myself, and I'm really, it's really important for me that she isn't just immersed in a virtual world, that she's going out and she's exploring and creating and inventing and being playful. I think it's so critical to our development as human beings and happiness for the rest of our lives. I'm going to go back, and we have another question from the audience I'd like to put to you, because we're unbelievably running out of time already. But it is, are there any other genres or age groups you want to work projects on for, or create properties for? Or do you like focusing on that 5 to 7 age group? Do you like that specific age group, or do you ever see them? Would you allow your characters to grow up?
So I am working on a script right now for what would be like, I think it's an 8 to 9 year old troop. So coming into middle grade, and it's called Night Chef, and it's about a raccoon who's like a legendary chef. And I don't know if you've ever seen like Tampopo, where there's a scene where the hobos go into a kitchen, they sneak into someone's house at night, and they cook up an entire delicious breakfast, like so professionally, as if they're like the best line chefs, and then they sneak back out and nobody knows any better. It's kind of like inspired by that.
So are these characters all in the same ecosystem? Is it a park? Is it the woods? Is it Queens? Are all these animals like hanging out in Queens?
So I haven't had a genesis of an idea yet since I moved to Queens. I moved back to Queens like 2 years ago. And so the Night Chef, so Night Chef was actually was generated in Queens, but it's not part of the same world as the Squirrels, unfortunately, because most of the scenery happens at night, and I wanted to focus more on the homes of people. So, and less of, it doesn't take place as much in the park. So the squirrels are really contained within that park. And maybe that's good for that age group, where they can kind of go wild, but it's still, I don't know, maybe that's like the mother in me where I was like, but then they still have to all be in the park.
They have to play together in the park.
Yeah,
The kids who are allowed out of the park, they get to go be chefs with hobos or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah. And so this one is like, it's definitely a lot more like noir, where like they're just going into people's homes.
So you mentioned noir. Is it going to be a darker story?
Yeah, well, it always happens at night, right? Because they're nocturnal, and it's more of a drama. So the raccoon has lost their teacher, who is a chef who taught them and took them in and taught them. The raccoon's an orphan, and so there is like a more of a loss that they're trying to figure out for themselves.
So it's really interesting that your work is focused on animals, but it's really telling the stories of the human condition of children.
Yeah, but that's like a lot of picture books, like children's books are that way, right? Like my first book that I ever read by myself was, and I think it's like a lot of people's favorite, is Charlotte's Web.
Sure.
And so that's really has like a lot of mature themes, but it's all talking animals. So
right,
it's a great it's great to use animals as characters, because they're kind of outside of the rules of like the children in society, where they have to sleep at a certain time, they have to live in a certain place with their families. They have a little more wildness and freedom, but then if they talk, they can also be childlike in their interests. So it's like they almost have like this power and this freedom to like really pursue an adventure. Yeah, it's something like
that's sort of like, I guess, because you're making them anthropomorphic,
right?
That you are taking the best of both worlds. You're taking the freedom of a wild animal,
Right?
Taking the structure, I guess, for lack of a better metaphor, of childhood.
Right, something like that, and also that they don't have to play in the rules as much as like people would be like, why is that little girl like Pippi Longstocking wouldn't fly anymore these days, like why is she not sleeping at bedtime, and has anyone fed her like lunch or dinner, or like where are her parents? And
right,
with animals you don't really ask those questions as much.
So there's no helicopter parenting with squirrels.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like about it.
I understand. I see. Wow, interesting. Yeah. Wow. So let's see, what haven't we covered yet? Do you draw every day? Do you draw in the park? Do you have a sketchbook?
I have sketchbooks. I can show you some of my sketchbooks.
I'd love to see some of your development process, because
a real mess.
I just love it when I see where stuff comes from, because there's an evolution.
So this is actually pretty tight thumbnails for me.
Wow, you do a lot of thumbnails on a page.
Yeah, I really try to work small. I found it very freeing for me.
Do you burn through a whole story? Do you do like a first draft of all your keyframes right away and then go back, or how is your process? Do you take how much time do you spend? My favorite part is laying out and the puzzle, an emerging puzzle that you create that you move forward. What is that? Is that something you enjoy, and how long does that part of the process take you?
So that part. Like I have like messier sketchbooks I wanted to show you, but I don't see them.
It's okay. You can show. We could just see.
Like I said, this one's very tight. This is like a later stage sketchbook where I actually have the script written.
Oh, okay.
So the sketchbooks that are when they're still kind of turning into an outline. They're not even an outline yet. Is like drawings of trucks. It'll just be drawings of trucks, and then like my grocery list.
Right.
And, like someone's phone number that I have to call to like. Right. To pick up my kid or something,
I get it.
Squirrels, and then some tree or something, and it's just like a mess, a hodgepodge of stuff.
Are you able to like that? This is what I talk about when I have students, and I'm like, if you can, forget about your roommate issues, forget about the phone bill, forget about even try to forget what you're going to have for lunch, even though you're hungry, right?
Right.
Try to keep yourself immersed in the act of creativity. Is that something you're able to do? Is that why you go to the park and just draw the squirrels and look at donut trucks, or is it all happening at the same time? Is it like in this ether, and then you carve out pieces? Like, how does that work for you creatively?
Yeah, I mean, it is. There's a lot. The good thing about writing is, you can get a lot of ideas while you don't need any like space to do it necessarily. Like, you can work on ideas while you're washing dishes. You can work on ideas anytime you're kind of alone doing something when like repetitive that doesn't involve too much. So actually, I do get a lot of ideas while washing dishes, and I also kind of
Really?
work on a lot of like plot holes when I'm like about to wake up in the morning. Like I'll just stay in bed like for an extra 30 minutes, or I don't know how long it is. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that could work. Like that. And then, I try to remember that. And when I do sit down to like write, I can try to, and I do figure things out that way.
So let me ask you: do you do your dishes at night?
I do dishes at night. I do dishes whenever whenever I
Well,
can.
I was just curious because if you do your dishes at night and you go to sleep, right? You sleep all night and you wake up with your plot holes. I'm wondering, you think creativity can happen when we're asleep?
Oh no, it definitely happens when you're asleep. That's a really important thing. Sleep is really important. I really believe that, and you solve a lot of problems and you figure out a lot of things while you're sleeping. So if I don't get a lot of sleep, I'm not gonna get any ideas. So I can work on a deadline and I can definitely finish things that are already created, but I'm not gonna come up with a new story if I'm not sleeping. So.
I get a little nutty sometimes. I guess we're talking about squirrels. Is I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have to run up and to a drawing and then hit the drawing and draw or write something, or I just I can't contain it. Does that ever happen to you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it definitely has happened to me where I'll be like tossing and turning, and then I'll just finally be like, let me just get up, I'll go into the living room, turn on the lights, and get this out of my system. And usually, actually, some of that stuff is usable.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of it is not.
All right. And that leads us to, or that leads us to another question from the audience that might be the only one we have time for, maybe not. But it's: do you have any last words or advice for aspiring creators who also would like to become illustrators, cartoonists, graphic novelists?
I think get your ideas down, and be inspired by your life, and don't like. I think don't worry too much about when they're gonna come out. Like for me, it took me a long time to finally get a graphic novel published, and it just sort of like it's like the right timing, and you had to be in the right place, and it's just a long like winding journey. And I don't know, that's not necessarily true for everybody, but it was for me, and I don't think it was a bad thing. I think I figured out some things over time. So but I did have stuff like I never stopped really working on it, even if it was like less percentage of time. I always had that like dream still to do it. So I wouldn't stress out too much about that.
I think students stress out too much about when am I going to be successful? When is it going to happen for me?
Yeah.
And it always comes down to the same thing. And the same answer for most creators is perseverance, faith in yourself, and do it out of love.
Yeah. It's a marathon to me. It's a marathon of like surviving and sticking around and keeping something in the game. Like, yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. Thank you, Mika. That was just lovely. Very insightful and very fun.
You.
I really enjoyed finding out, and I'm sure our audience did, enjoyed finding out about hanging out with squirrels and getting good donuts and developing different characters and exploring your past with your grandparents. It's been very insightful, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of DiversityCon and FIT for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Ed, and thank you, Diversity Comic Con, and good luck to everybody who is pursuing this for a career. It's a great time to be doing it. So
It is. And it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.